Hollywood is a place that attracts millions of dreamers. They come here with hopes of turning their dreams into reality, yet few consider the dual nature of this world. On the surface, everything appears bright and glamorous. Red carpets, awards, parties, and constant media attention. But if you dig deeper, you'll uncover another side to this world, one hidden behind the heavy curtains of exclusive events and elite parties. It's a world of intrigue, secrets, and concealed dangers. And it's into this darker side of Hollywood that Jane Doe, a young actress trying to find her place in the world of cinema, stumbled. Jane grew up in a small town in the heart of the country. Her childhood unfolded among endless fields, where the main entertainments were summer fairs and performances by the local theater. She had always dreamed of the big city, of life on stage or in the movies. When her parents learned of her ambitions, they smiled sadly, trying to hide their disappointment. They knew how hard it was to escape a small town and find success in a world governed by money and connections. But Jane was determined. After finishing high school, she moved to Los Angeles, naively hoping that her talent would quickly conquer Hollywood. The first years were tough. She went through countless auditions, often facing rejection or landing secondary roles. Her apartment was small and cramped, but Jane believed it was only temporary. She lived with the dream that one day, her talent would be recognized. And that day came. After months of struggle, she landed a role in a popular TV series. It wasn't a lead role, but her character caught the attention of viewers, and critics began to talk about her talent. From then on, everything changed. Her agent informed her that she was now being invited to high-profile parties attended by influential producers and directors. The press called her the new face of Hollywood, and invitations to the most prestigious events began to pour in. Jane hoped this would be her chance at a true breakthrough. However, with success came the harsh realities of the industry, of which she hadn't been aware. To stay in the spotlight, it wasn't enough to just act in movies. She had to be seen. Her agent insisted that Jane attend every possible event, party, and meeting with important people. This became an integral part of her life, though it didn't always thrill her. One day, she received an invitation to a party at a mansion in the hills of Beverly Hills. The owner of this estate was a powerful music producer, known for his ability to discover new talents and help them achieve fame. Jane had heard of him before. Rumors swirled around him, including whispers that his parties were more than just entertainment. Behind closed doors, something dark took place, which was never publicized. The party. Jane hesitated for a long time, wondering if she should go to this party. Her intuition told her it wasn't as simple as it seemed. But her agent was convinced it was a fantastic opportunity. He kept repeating, "This is where you meet the people who truly decide the fate of actors and artists. You need to be there to get noticed." Although her heart told her to stay away, ambition and fear of being overlooked prevailed. The day of the party was clear and sunny. Los Angeles was bathed in the warm rays of sunset as Jane got ready to leave. She chose a sophisticated but not overly showy dress. It was a light satin gown that draped smoothly over her figure, making her look elegant but understated. She decided not to impress with excessive glitz, relying instead on her natural beauty and talent to speak for themselves. When she arrived at the mansion, she was met with an enormous estate hidden behind tall hedges and metal gates. As she drove up the long driveway, Jane held her breath, taking in the scale of the property. Tall columns, marble statues in the garden, and well-manicured lawns. It looked like a palace detached from the real world. The house itself, softly illuminated by lanterns, appeared grand and a bit intimidating at the same time. At the entrance, she was greeted with smiles, but these smiles weren't warm. The faces seemed like masks concealing something cold and distant. Security guards, dressed in elegant suits, escorted her into the hall where the guests had already gathered. Soft music played in the background, and the air was filled with the scent of expensive perfume and cigarette smoke. Crossing the threshold, Jane found herself in the heart of the event. It was a party like the ones she had seen in movies. Luxurious gowns, diamonds, famous faces. Around her, actors, singers, and producers mingled, each with their own story, their own secrets. Jane felt her mind gradually filling with a sense of danger, even though everything on the surface seemed perfect. Holding a glass of champagne, she observed what was going on. Cameras and photographers watched her every move. Jane played her part. She smiled and conversed with people she knew or at least recognized from movies or television. But her thoughts were elsewhere. She couldn't shake the feeling that all these people were playing their own games, and that she was just another pawn on the chessboard that night. Suddenly, a man in a dark suit approached her. He didn't look like an ordinary guest. His gaze was stern, and his movements were confident. He introduced himself as the host's assistant and told her that Jane was invited to the private area for special guests. It sounded like a prestigious invitation, but at the same time, she felt a sense of unease. Why had she been singled out? She hesitated, but her agent had repeatedly said it would be foolish to decline such invitations. "This is your chance," she reminded herself, following the man up a spiral staircase. As they ascended, the music from below faded away, and the space around them became increasingly quiet. Only their footsteps echoed in the empty hallways. Her heart beat faster. What awaited her behind those doors? The doors opened, and Jane found herself in a room that was starkly different from the glamorous world of the first floor. There was no noise, no hustle, no cameras. Just a few people sat in the dimly lit room, barely speaking. Their faces were serious, and they seemed disconnected from the rest of the world. Old-fashioned furniture held glasses filled with drinks whose scent was sharp and unfamiliar. Jane scanned the room. Her gaze settled on a large mirror in the corner. The flickering candlelight danced on its surface, creating a strange atmosphere. But even stranger was the fact that in the mirror, she saw not only those who were in the room but also figures that shouldn't have been there. They moved, yet these shapes were ghostly, almost transparent. Jane froze for a moment, trying to determine if it was just a trick of the light. She took a step back and looked at the mirror again. The shadows kept moving. Her heart began to race, and she decided to stop looking in the direction of the mirror. One of the men sitting by the old table stood up and slowly approached her. His voice was quiet but piercing. "Don't be surprised. This is only the beginning. The game starts now." He nodded towards a door that led to yet another room. Jane didn't know what to say. She felt trapped, but she couldn't understand what kind of game she had been drawn into. Her body felt heavy, as if each step required immense effort. The drink she had tasted earlier was having a strange effect. Her consciousness was slowly drifting away from reality, and everything around her seemed blurred. The man opened the door to the next room, revealing another strange space before her eyes. In the center was an old wooden table, on which lay an array of peculiar objects. Masks, books with yellowed pages, candles, and items that resembled ancient artifacts. The atmosphere was oppressive, like an ancient castle where every item holds its own story. Behind closed doors, Jane stood at the threshold of a new room, her anxiety peaking. The space beyond the door seemed to absorb all sounds, and even her own breathing felt loud in the oppressive silence. Her heart pounded so hard she thought everyone in the room might hear it. Her legs felt heavier with each step, but she finally crossed into a dimly lit space where only a few candles cast long shadows on the walls. The room looked like a scene from an old movie. Heavy curtains almost completely covered the windows, creating a timeless atmosphere. In the center of the room stood a table adorned with strange items, things Jane could barely identify. Some looked like ancient artifacts, while others resembled tools for ritual use. The man who had opened the door now stood beside her, his figure almost ghostly in the shadows. He gestured for her to sit. Jane hesitated but sensed that refusing wasn't an option. She had no choice. She sank into the chair, striving to appear calm, though her hands trembled slightly. "What is this place?" she asked, trying not to reveal her fear. "This isn't just a place," the man replied, his tone unchanging. "It's a doorway to the real Hollywood, to what lies behind the scenes. You always thought you'd seen it all? In truth, you've only seen a mask, the surface. The real thing is here, behind these doors." His words were cryptic but simultaneously filled Jane with fear and intrigue. The more she listened, the more she realized that this evening and this room marked a turning point. Her life could change forever. But was she ready for that? "But why am I here?" Her voice was quiet, as if she were speaking to herself. "You've been chosen. Your presence here signifies that you're ready to see the truth. But truth always comes with a price." Jane felt a cold sweat run down her spine. What was this price? What was truly required of her in exchange for the truth? She took a breath, trying to gather her thoughts. But at that moment, the other guests in the room began to move. They approached the table, where the strange items lay, picking up masks and putting them on their faces, forming a circle around the table. Each mask was unique. One resembled a beast with long teeth, another was adorned with intricate patterns, and a third looked like an ancient golden helmet. When everyone had gathered, the man who had brought Jane here also approached the table and picked up a mask, a simple black one with no embellishments. He slowly put it on, and now his face was entirely hidden. It felt as if no longer a man, but a silhouette stood before her in the dim light. "You have a choice, Jane." His voice rang out, now hollow and distant. "You can stay and become part of this world, or you can go back and never see Hollywood's true face again. But remember, if you leave, you'll never be able to return." Jane sat in silence, her thoughts racing. She knew something strange was happening here tonight, but she couldn't tell if she really wanted to be part of it. But what if this was her chance? Her chance to go where others dreamed of, but never could? What kind of world was she being invited into? And what truth was he about to reveal? After a long pause, the man, now speaking for everyone, raised his hand and gave a signal. In an instant, everyone wearing masks began to move. They lit new candles, placed them on the table, and began to chant strange words in a language Jane didn't understand. But the sounds of those words stirred bizarre images in her mind. Each word seemed to evoke scenes unrelated to reality. Fields, ruined cities, ancient temples where rituals were performed. The man in the black mask came closer, holding a small silver chalice in his hands. A step into the unknown. Jane didn't know what awaited her beyond those doors, but she sensed there was no turning back to her old life. She paused for a moment, staring into the darkness that loomed beyond the threshold. But fear and anxiety urged her to take that step. The woman who had invited her to go forward nodded silently, signaling that it was the right choice, though her smile looked more like a predator's grin. Beyond the doors was a long corridor, illuminated by a soft yet eerie candlelight. Candles lined every step, casting strange shadows on the walls, which seemed to shift and breathe along with the flames. Each of Jane's footsteps echoed loudly in the silence, and with every meter she walked, she felt herself drifting further from the world she once knew. The woman walked beside her, silent, occasionally casting brief glances at Jane, as if trying to read her thoughts. Jane, on the other hand, tried to remain composed, though inside she was overwhelmed by panic. Every fiber of her being warned that something terrifying lay ahead, something she might not be able to face. "We're almost there." The woman finally spoke as the corridor began to widen, revealing large oak doors adorned with intricate patterns. "What is this place?" Jane asked softly, unable to hide her unease. "This is where you will learn the truth," the woman replied. "It is the center of everything you've seen. All of Hollywood's secrets begin here and remain here." The woman raised her hand and lightly knocked on the doors. They slowly swung open, as if responding to her touch. Before Jane lay an enormous hall, larger than anything she had ever seen in her life. The ceiling was so high it resembled the structure of an ancient cathedral. The floor was covered in elaborate rugs, and along the walls stood massive statues, each holding a candelabra. At the center of the hall, on a raised platform, stood the same table she had seen earlier, but now it was adorned with even larger masks, ancient artifacts, and candles that burned brightly, casting an odd light. Around the table stood people Jane didn't recognize, but each of them seemed like part of a mysterious ritual. "What's happening here?" she asked again, though now her voice was barely audible. "This is what you'll never see on the red carpets or the big screens," the woman replied. "This is the true heart of Hollywood. This is where stars are born, and not just movie stars." Jane looked around at the people in masks standing around the table. They were all silent, but their movements were synchronized, as if they were performing a long-practiced ritual. A chill ran through her body, and she felt herself sinking deeper into this strange atmosphere. Every mask seemed alive, every statue watching her. "And what do I do now?" Her voice trembled, and she couldn't hide her fear. "You must make a choice," the woman said, gesturing toward the table. "The choice is simple but important. You can become a part of this world, or you can refuse and lose everything. But remember, those who refuse never get a second chance. Their existence is erased from this reality." Jane stepped closer to the table. On it lay 3 masks. One was silver with delicate patterns, the second gold with simple yet majestic lines, and the third was black, similar to the one the man had worn at the previous party. Each of these masks seemed to hold deep symbolism, though Jane didn't fully understand what each represented. "Choose your fate," the woman said softly. Her voice was calm, but there was an underlying urgency. "This is your path to a new world." Jane stood still, staring at the masks. The choice before her felt like something far greater than just a ritual. It was a choice that would determine her entire future. Her hands trembled as she reached out toward the table. The silver mask looked elegant and seductive, the gold one strong and dependable, and the black one haunting and mysterious. Consciousness trapped. When Jane opened her eyes, an unfamiliar scene unfolded before her. First, she couldn't understand where she was. Everything around her looked completely different from what she'd seen before losing consciousness. She lay on an antique couch covered in red velvet, and the room she found herself in resembled something from another era. The massive wooden wall panels, heavy drapes, and old portraits staring down at her created a haunting atmosphere. Her head throbbed with pain, and the memories of what had happened before were blurred. Jane raised a hand to her head, trying to collect her scattered thoughts. The last thing she remembered was the chalice, the golden drink, and the man's voice calling it her destiny. But what had happened after that? How did she end up here? Rising to her feet, Jane scanned the room. The light was dim, with only a few candles casting a ghostly glow, creating long, eerie shadows on the walls. There wasn't a soul in sight, just her, alone in the chilling silence. Her heartbeat quickened. Was this just another stage of the evening's party? Was this a game she had been dragged into? Or had something truly dark and dangerous become part of her life? She approached one of the windows and looked out. A grim scene met her gaze. Heavy clouds blanketed the sky, making it hard to tell the time of day. Only a light mist cloaked the hills visible beyond the window, reminding her that somewhere beyond this estate lay another world. But it felt so distant and unreachable. Suddenly, the door to the room creaked open, and a figure in a dark cloak entered. It was a woman, seemingly another guest from the party whom Jane didn't recognize. Her eyes were calm, almost indifferent, but they held something more. She moved closer to Jane, who stood frozen, trying to make sense of what was happening. "You're awake," the woman said quietly, with a faint smile. Her voice was soft, but it sent a shiver down Jane's spine. "That means you're ready to know more." "More about what?" Jane struggled to contain the anxiety that grew with each passing second. "The truth," replied the woman, moving even closer. "Everything you thought you knew about this world is just the surface. Hollywood is more than movies, glamour, and fame. There's something deeper, far older, and far more dangerous. And now you're a part of this world." Jane could hardly believe her ears. Was this woman serious? Or was this just another act in the elaborate theater she'd been drawn into? Her mind tried to find logic in everything happening around her, but fear began to take hold. "I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to be part of this," Jane replied anxiously. "I want to leave. This is all too strange." The woman looked at her with mild sympathy, but her response was merciless. "You can't leave now, Jane. Once you made your choice and drank, you became part of a game from which there is no exit. You've already seen more than you were meant to, and now, this truth won't let you go." Jane felt panic rising within her. She recalled the shadows in the mirror, the masks, the ritual, and the drink she'd consumed. Something within her had changed after that. Her body seemed to respond differently. Her thoughts were clouded, and the world around her started to feel foreign. "What do you want from me?" she asked, trying to grasp what was happening. "All we ask is that you accept your role in this world," the woman replied, stepping closer, her face now mere inches from Jane's. "You've already taken the first step. You weren't chosen by chance. And if you accept this, your life will change forever." "What if I refuse?" Jane searched for a way out of this situation. The woman paused for a moment, then quietly said, "If you refuse, you'll never be able to return to who you once were. Those who decline disappear. Their names are forgotten. Their faces vanish from the screens. You'll become a shadow in this world, like so many before you." The woman's words hit like a blow. Jane felt despair overwhelm her. Was she truly trapped now? Was there no way out? Her head spun at the realization that her life might end here, in this room, far from the world she had aspired to. She took a few steps back, trying to find a solution. "You can try to resist, but that will only delay the inevitable," the woman continued, observing her movements. "Everyone who enters this world eventually accepts its rules. There's no point fighting something you can't escape." Jane began to understand that her way back was cut off. She found herself in a world where the usual rules no longer applied. Her choice seemed clear. Either she embraced this new world with all its dark secrets, or she risked losing everything she had ever had. The woman moved to the door and opened it, gesturing for Jane to follow. "Come on. It's time to make your final choice. Decide whether you're ready to become part of the true Hollywood." Jane took one last look around the room, and a strange sense of inevitability washed over her. She took a deep breath and, with no other choice, followed the woman into the unknown. "This is what you'll never see on red carpets or movie screens," the woman answered. "This is Hollywood's true heart. Stars are born here, and not just movie stars." Jane looked around at the people in masks surrounding the table. They were all silent, yet their movements were synchronized as if performing a well-practiced ritual. A chill enveloped her body, and she felt herself sinking deeper into this alien atmosphere. Every mask seemed alive. Every statue appeared to be watching her. "What am I supposed to do now?" Her voice trembled, and she couldn't hide her fear. "You have to make a choice," the woman said, gesturing toward the table. "It's a simple but important one. You can become part of this world or refuse and lose everything. Just remember, those who refuse don't get a second chance. Their existence is erased from this reality." Jane stepped closer to the table. 3 masks lay upon it. One was silver, adorned with delicate patterns. The second was gold, with simple yet majestic lines. And the third was black, resembling the mask worn by the man at the previous party. Each mask held its own symbolism, though Jane didn't yet understand what each one represented. "Choose your fate," the woman whispered. Her voice was calm, but there was an underlying pressure within it. "This is your path into a new world." Jane stood still, staring at the masks. The choice before her seemed larger than a mere ritual. It was a decision that would define her entire future. Her hands trembled as she reached toward the table. The silver mask looked elegant and alluring, the gold one strong and reassuring, while the black mask appeared ominous and mysterious. A new world. The sense of transformation was instant. The moment Jane put on the mask, she felt as if her entire being had fused with this enigmatic world. The light in the grand hall grew warmer, and the movements of the people around her slowed, becoming almost majestic. Jane no longer felt fear. It was as if everything around her was unfolding according to a script she subconsciously knew and understood. Her mind, once torn between fear and uncertainty, was now filled with calm and confidence. The woman in the cloak led her through the hall, and now every step Jane took felt like a step into a new life. Around her, new paths were opening. Not physical, but mental and emotional. She saw the faces of people she once knew, but now those faces seemed distant, as though she was no longer a part of their world. "You're one of us now, Jane," the woman said, guiding her into another corridor. "You made the right choice. Hollywood will give you everything you desire. But remember, the price is always steep." The price, that word left a bitter aftertaste in Jane's mind. She tried not to dwell on it, but something deep within her subconscious hinted that tonight was just the beginning. She had been given power, introduced to a new world, but could she live with the truth she had learned? They stopped in front of a large mirror at the end of the corridor. This mirror was almost identical to the one she'd seen at the party, but now it looked different. She saw herself in it, but it was more than just a reflection. Jane felt her gaze drawn into what was reflected behind her. There stood the same shadows, but now they were clear and distinct. They were people she didn't know, yet she felt their presence in her life. "This mirror shows more than your reflection," the woman said. "It shows your fate." Jane looked at her reflection, and something within her shifted. She no longer saw herself as the uncertain actress trying to break into the film industry. Before her stood a woman who knew what she wanted. A woman ready to go to any lengths to achieve her goals. This was her new image, her new self. "You now have all the tools to become a true star," the woman continued, smiling slightly. "But remember, the more you gain, the more will be demanded of you. Nothing in this world is free." A chill ran through Jane's body. These words were a reminder that every step in this world had consequences. Her choice had already been made, and now she had to live with the results. The next few weeks of Jane's life turned into a whirlwind of events. She landed the lead role in a major film, one she had only dreamed of before. Her face graced magazine covers, and her name became known to everyone in Hollywood. Her phone never stopped ringing, interview requests, new contracts, meetings with influential people. Suddenly, she was at the top, and the whole world looked at her with envy and admiration. But with success came another side of this world. Every night, Jane had strange dreams. They were so real that upon waking, she couldn't distinguish them from reality. Her dreams were filled with the images of those same shadows she had seen in the mirror. They stood behind her, watched her, but did nothing. They merely waited. One day, during yet another premiere, Jane began to feel that these shadows hadn't left her. She could see them in the reflections of windows, in the glare of camera flashes, even in the people surrounding her on the red carpet. They were there, always watching her, but never speaking a word. Her life became a dual existence. By day, she was a star, radiant and successful. By night, she was haunted by mysterious figures that reminded her of the price she paid for her success. Her agent, directors, and colleagues noticed nothing unusual. They saw only her rising fame, her talent, and her confidence. But Jane knew that with each passing day, she was sinking deeper into this dark world. One evening, after a lavish party, Jane returned home and saw that the mirror in her bedroom had changed. Now it was not just a mirror but a window into the world where the shadows lived. They stood behind it, silently watching her, as they always did. But this time, one of the shadows stepped closer to the glass and spoke. "You took what you wanted," the shadow whispered, "but now we've come for our due." The words sent a chill through her body. She knew this moment would come. She knew her choice had consequences. But now she had to face the truth, the price she would have to pay for her success. The price of fame. The night the shadow spoke, Jane felt something new. Not just fear, but the realization that her life no longer belonged to her. She had hoped that the success and fame that had come to her so suddenly would remain her only companions. But now she understood. Every gift has a price. Her body froze with tension as the shadow in the mirror began to move again. It was closer than ever before. Its outlines no longer looked like mere blurred silhouettes. It was a face she had never seen before, yet it looked familiar, as if it were part of herself. The face had her features, but it was distorted, with a faint smile that hinted at something cruel and inevitable. "You got everything you wanted," said the voice from the mirror, its words heavy and sharp. "But now it's time to pay the price." Jane shuddered. She understood she could no longer avoid the truth. Her choice to wear the mask that night, to accept the offer to become part of Hollywood's secret world, had its consequences. She had been given the chance to become the person she had always dreamed of being, but now her life no longer belonged to her. "What do you want?" Her voice almost cracked, but she held back. She needed to stay strong, even though everything inside her screamed to run, to hide, to change everything she had done. "We came for what is ours," said the shadow. "You took yours, and now it's our time to take ours. We gave you everything you desired, and now you have to give something in return." "But what?" Jane still struggled to understand exactly what these figures demanded from her life. The shadow in the mirror moved closer, and its voice grew softer but even more unsettling. "You know what you must give. You knew that night when you accepted our gift. You knew that every great dream has its price, and now it's time to pay." Jane felt a cold sweat down her back. Her hands trembled as a deep fear gripped her mind. She remembered that night in the mansion, where she drank the potion, where she wore the mask, where she felt that invisible force that enveloped her, promising success and fame. But now she understood that along with success, she had allowed those forces to control her life. "I didn't know," she whispered, trying to find an excuse. "I didn't understand what it all meant." "But now you do," the shadow replied. "And now you must choose. In this world, there is no turning back. There are only two choices. You stay with us, embrace your role to the end, or you disappear, like those who came before you." Jane sank to the floor by the mirror, her breathing quick and heavy. She felt her life shattering into pieces right before her eyes. She wanted to be a great actress, to succeed, but she hadn't understood that success comes with conditions that cannot be ignored. "What must I do?" she asked, feeling that the choice had already been made for her. "You must give up your will," said the shadow, its voice growing even colder. "You must fully become part of our world. You no longer belong to yourself. You will become one of us." "And if I refuse?" Jane asked, hoping to find any chance of escape. "Then you will disappear like all the others who refused. You will be forgotten. Your face will vanish from screens. Your name will no longer appear on cast lists. Everything you built will disappear, and no one will remember you ever existed." Jane felt cold clutch her heart. She realized that this choice was final. She could no longer retreat. If she refused, her existence would be erased. But if she accepted, her life would never be her own. She stood up and looked directly into the mirror, where the shadow stood. Her eyes were now filled with determination, though fear was still buried deep within. "I accept," she said softly, though the words felt unbearably heavy. The shadow in the mirror nodded with satisfaction. Its face twisted into a slight smile that resembled victory. "Then your fate is sealed," said the shadow. "You are now one of us. You will get everything you desire, but remember, your life no longer belongs to you." After those words, the shadow in the mirror vanished, leaving the room filled with an eerie silence. Jane stood before the mirror for a few more minutes, realizing that her choice was made and that her life now belonged to forces she could not control. In the weeks that followed, her career continued to soar. She landed lead roles in the biggest films. Her name became synonymous with success. But every night, when she was alone, the shadows returned. They always watched her, reminding her of the choice she had made. They were no longer just observers. They became part of her life, her thoughts, her actions. Jane no longer belonged to herself. Her life was now controlled by unseen forces that gave her everything she wanted, but took away the most precious thing, her freedom. She realized that the fame and success she achieved were merely a facade for the true reality in which she now found herself. And though her face adorned magazine covers and her films were on the lips of the world, she always remembered. Every one of her successes was just part of the deal, and the price for it was higher than she could have ever imagined. Under control, time passed, and Jane found herself increasingly immersed in the new reality she had chosen that fateful, ominous night. Her fame continued to grow, and with every new film she starred in, she delivered another box office hit. She won prestigious awards, and her name was plastered across major magazines and websites. But behind all that success lay another reality, one that only she was aware of. The shadows continued to watch her. They had become an inseparable part of her life, their presence always palpable, even when she was surrounded by people. Sometimes she could catch glimpses of the shadows appearing in mirrors on set or in the reflections of cameras when she posed for photographers. They didn't speak to her, but every glance from them reminded her of the price she had paid. She had learned to live with this feeling. Every new success was a result of the deal she had made. And while Jane had achieved everything she had ever dreamed of, a growing sense of emptiness gnawed at her from within. She no longer felt joy from her fame. Her life had become like a machine, where every movement and action were predetermined. One day, as Jane sat in her spacious living room, her thoughts drifted to the past. She recalled the time when she was just starting her career, when every new opportunity filled her with genuine excitement and a hunger to work. Now all of that was gone. She no longer felt the inspiration that once drove her forward. Her life was now merely the product of a bargain. Suddenly, a familiar mirror appeared before her, the same one that had revealed the shadows to her. But this time, in it, she saw herself not just a reflection but as another person entirely. It was Jane, but not the Jane known to millions. This was a version of her that could have lived a completely different life, without the deal, without the price she had paid. "This could have been you," a quiet voice echoed from the mirror. "You could have chosen another path." Jane shuddered. It was hard to look at this reflection because it showed her what she had lost, the freedom to choose. She felt a wave of despair wash over her, but at the same time, a faint glimmer of hope flickered in her mind. "Can I still change it?" she whispered. "Change is possible, but the price will be even higher," the voice replied. "You've already made your choice, but every choice comes with consequences. If you want to be free, you'll have to pay an even greater cost." Jane felt her heart tighten. She realized that her previous life had been just a preparation for this moment. She had been willing to pay for fame, but now she saw that this fame was hollow. She no longer wanted to live in a world where her every move was controlled by shadows, where her freedom was nothing but an illusion. "What must I do?" she asked, looking into the mirror. "You must return what was given to you," the voice said. "You must give up everything you've gained and lose everything you've achieved. Only then can you reclaim your will." The words felt like a sentence. Jane understood that this meant losing everything: fame, success, money, recognition. But she could no longer live in this reality. She wanted to reclaim her true self. "I'll do it," she said firmly, though her voice trembled with fear. The moment she spoke those words, everything around her began to change. The mirror vanished, and the room filled with an otherworldly light. The shadows that had always been by her side began to retreat. They were no longer part of her world. Jane felt her body grow lighter, as if she had been freed from a weight that had pressed on her for so long. But with that freedom came the realization that her life would never be the same again. She had lost everything she had gained, but she had regained the most precious thing of all, her freedom. The end of the deal. The next day, when Jane woke up, everything was different. Her phone no longer rang with offers for new roles. Her name no longer appeared in the news. She stepped outside and noticed that no one recognized her anymore. She was no longer a star. She had returned to a world where her existence held no fame. Yet, instead of despair, Jane felt an odd sense of calm. She was no longer part of the dark world that had controlled her life. She could now do whatever she wanted, free from the fear that her actions were being guided by unseen forces. Jane began a new life, far from the shining screens and red carpets. The shadows no longer haunted her, and she was finally able to be herself. Her film career was over, but now she had something she never had before: freedom to live without the chains of dark powers. Over the following months, Jane realized that her decision had been the right one. She had lost her fame, but in return, she had found herself. And although her name was no longer in the spotlight, she felt that her life was now real. One day, as she passed an old mirror that stood in her new apartment, Jane paused and looked at herself. She was a different Jane. Not a star, not a legend, but simply a person who had walked her path and reclaimed her freedom. The shadows were no longer there, and now she knew that the most precious gift anyone could receive in this world is the freedom to be oneself. This could be the conclusion of Jane's story, as she has fully walked her path and made her choice. However, if you'd like to add another event or an alternate resolution, we can definitely think that through together.